Recessions are marked drops in economic activity that can endure for several months or even years. When a country's economy faces negative gross domestic product, GDP, growing unemployment, declining retail sales, and contraction income and manufacturing metrics over an extended period of time, experts proclaim a recession. Recessions are seen as an inevitable component of the economic cycle, or the predictable rhythm of expansion and recession in a country's economy. In a recession, businesses struggle to sell products, individuals lose their jobs, and the nation's overall economic output falls. A number of variables affect when the economy enters a recession officially. Julius Shiskin, an economist, developed the following general guidelines in 1974 to describe a recession. 2 straight quarters of falling GDP was the most well-liked example. According to Shiskin, a healthy economy grows over time, so 2 quarters in a row of declining output point to significant underlying issues. Over time, this definition of a recession became the accepted norm. It is widely agreed that the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, is the source for information on the beginning and end dates of U.S. recessions. A recession, according to the NBER, is a large fall in economic activity distributed across the economy, lasting more than a few months, often apparent in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail. The NBER's definition of a recession is more open-ended than Shiskin's guideline for defining one. For instance, the coronavirus can potentially cause a W-shaped recession, in which the economy declines for a quarter, then begins to expand before declining once again in the next quarter. By Shiskin's standards, this would not qualify as a recession, but the NBER definition may make it one. A recession can begin in a variety of ways, such as by an unexpected economic shock or the effects of unchecked inflation. One of the primary causes of a recession is one of the following phenomena. An economic shock is an unanticipated issue that causes significant financial harm. In the 1970s, OPEC abruptly stopped supplying oil to the United States, sparking a recession as well as protracted queues at petrol stations. A more recent example of a quick economic shock is the coronavirus outbreak, which crippled economies everywhere. Excessive debt. If people or companies take on too much debt, the cost of servicing it may rise to the point where they are unable to pay their debts. The economy is then turned upside down by increasing debt defaults and bankruptcies. A recession brought on by excessive debt was most prominently demonstrated by the mid-2000s housing bubble that sparked the Great Recession. Property bubbles. Emotionally motivated investing decisions almost always result in poor economic consequences. During a booming economy, investors may get overconfident. When characterizing the excessive stock market gains in the late 1990s, former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan is credited with coining the phrase, irrational exuberance, to describe this tendency. Stock market or real estate bubbles are inflated by irrational enthusiasm, and when they burst, panic selling may cause a market crash and a recession. Excessive inflation, the gradual, rising trend in prices known as inflation. Although high inflation is a risky occurrence, inflation itself isn't always a bad thing. By hiking interest rates, central banks can control inflation, but doing so reduces economic activity. In the 1970s, unchecked inflation was a persistent issue in the United States. The Federal Reserve abruptly increased interest rates in an effort to break the cycle, which brought about a recession. A recession can be brought on by excessive inflation, but it can also be brought on by too much deflation. Deflation occurs when prices drop over time, which lowers wages, which lowers prices even more. When a deflationary feedback loop becomes uncontrollable, consumers and businesses cease making purchases, which hurts the economy. Few resources are available to central banks and economists to address the fundamental issues that lead to deflation. A severe recession was brought on by Japan's troubles with deflation over the majority of the 1990s. Technological change. While new discoveries boost productivity and benefit the economy in the long run, there may be short-term periods of adjustment to them. There were several waves of labor-saving technical advancements in the 19th century. The Industrial Revolution led to recessions and difficult times by rendering entire professions obsolete. Some economists today are concerned that the abolition of entire job categories by AI and robotics might trigger recessions. The NBER keeps track of how long U.S. recessions typically last. NBER data show that the average length of a recession from 1945 to 2009 was 11 months. Compared to prior times, this is an improvement. The average length of the recession from 1854 to 1919 was 21.6 months. The United States has had 4 recessions over the previous 30 years, the recession of COVID-19. The most recent recession, which started in February 2020 and barely lasted 2 months, was the briefest in American history. A major recession, December 2007 to June 2009.